Hello everyone, this is Gary from Fantastic Fundas, and today in this lecture we are going to talk about capitalism and national movement. What was the role of capitalists, not just about the isms, we will be also talking about the capitalists. Right now, to understand the role of the capitalists in the national movement, I will first link it to the earlier lectures that we have done. So far, like we have talked about the princes and Indian national movement, we have talked about the peasant struggle, and we have talked about few socio-religious reform movement and the capitalist struggle. Sorry, and the national movement. Now, from the politics of these communities, if I may call them, we would now discuss the politics of the class, and that is the capitalist class over here. Now, the first thing is that you need to understand that what was the situation of the capitalist in India. In other words, why were capitalists growing? Why they were growing? Why did they grow? So the answer is, like, there were multiple reasons for this. First of all, in India there was focus on import substitution because of various awareness created by the nationalist movement led by other people, for example Gandhi or the Congress or the peasants and so on. So if the focus was on the khadi, the focus was on the self-produced goods of Indian goods. That is how that is the reason the Indian capitalist could also grow, because ultimately somebody will need to produce the goods, and it was the case of Indian capitalists producing those goods. And then there was other reason, and that was the internal trade was growing. Now goods produced were being consumed in other parts of India. Something produced in Tamil Nadu was being consumed in, let's say, Uttar Pradesh or Gujarat, maybe something like this, or just an example. And then, the outflow of the foreign capital had started. A lot of money was going out in India, so it created space for Indian capitalists to do all the work over here. Oh, by the way, one thing I missed to mention over here. Do you guys know what capitalism is? Capitalism, what's the meaning of this word? First of all, let's understand who is a capitalist. A capitalist is a person who is doing business according to the principles of capitalism. But what is this capitalism? I'll tell you. This will be very simplified definition of the whole concept. Capitalism is an economic system. If anyone asks you what is capitalism, it's an ism. Ism is always a philosophical or a system or some thought. It's on that sense. It's ism. So it's an economic system, first of all. What kind of economic system? In which there is private ownership of the means of production. There in this, and private ownership of goods and even for the services. And capitalism is always for profit, though it can also be for the welfare of others, but it is always having profit as part of it. And capitalism has few ingredients. For example, it will have the concept of private property. That means you as an individual, as a private person, can own property in capitalism. Second thing is, there is capital accumulation. Right? For example, all these rich people that you see, what do? They accumulate the profit. They can easily increase the wages of the laborers. No, they will keep maximum profit with them. That is the debatable effect of capitalism. And then in capitalism, as I said, there are wage laborers, because there is this capital accumulation. And then often in capitalism, often, not always, there is what is called as competitive market. Competitive market. What do you mean by competitive market? Where there is competition between two or more people. There is no monopoly. That is capitalism. Now, there is another form of capitalism also, which is which can be monopolistic capitalism at times. We will talk that in economy, not here. So now I'll tell you that Indian capitalist, it grew so strong that by the time 1944 came, 1944, in 1944, 62% of the large industry, right, and almost what is called as absolute control over small industry was of Indian capitalists. It was not of British. Now this is by 1944. This did not happen in one day. It took some time. That's like one part of it, of the capitalist position in India, the thing which I'm talking to you at the moment. And next thing is that at this time, one interesting aspect is that Indian capital was across many goods. For example, it was in sugar, it was in paper, paper industry, cement industry, and so on. Iron and steel, of course, is there, that you must have read in detail in geography. Now, not only this, we also got into other fields. For example, we got in the field of finance, insurance. Please do mention these words. They help, tell the teacher that I have read stuff, that I know things, that I have understood the history well. Because when I ask you what were the capitalists doing, you will say they were investing. That doesn't make sense. If I tell you that the capitalists in India were having a huge control over sugar, paper, cement, iron, steel, finance, jute, and so on, it makes a different impact. Now you may miss all this industry if you forget it all, but one thing you cannot forget in your paper is cotton industry. Our cotton industry grew so strong that Manchester, which was having almost absolute control over cotton industry, Manchester, now this was having almost absolute. Even this was impacted, and by 1919, Manchester's share of cotton industry of the world was reduced to only 40%. And why? Because Indian cotton industry was growing at this time. Now, in this background, you know how the situation of Indian capitalists was, what is capitalism. We are going to talk about capitalists and nationalism. That is our main topic. This was just the introductory part. Now, to understand the contribution of capitalist to nationalism, I'm going to write down here a sentence, and you can also note down this in your copies. Now, this is very important actually, and the sentence is said by Bipin Chandra. And the sentence has been quoted at many places. What is this? It says that capitalists, they grew not as a byproduct of colonization. Now, a lot of people in India, you might have heard them saying that, oh, Britishers favored India, we got industry because of them. But that is wrong thing. That is why I am giving time to this statement. You must understand this. Capitalism grew not as a byproduct of colonization, rather, and this is what Bipin Chandra is saying, not just Bipin Chandra, even so many other people agree with this, the given statement. Rather, it was inspired of and in opposition to colonialism. You write this sentence in your paper, you will get the marks. And in opposition to colonialism. Now, the kind of opposition, see the theme that we are trying to understand here, our theme is the methodology of the opposition by the capitalists against these Britishers. Now, there is often an accusation against these capitalists. I said they were opposing it, but there is also often an accusation against them, and that is that these capitalists, their approach was hesitant. Now, why this approach has been called as hesitant approach towards in support of nationalism and against Britishers. That is what I'm going to tell you here. Regarding this, Bipin Chandra says that Indian capitalists had developed uh, a long-term contradiction with imperialism. That is, they were opposed to imperialism, Britishers in long term, but they maintained their dependence on them in short term. Otherwise, they would not have been able to grow at all. That is what Bipin Chandra has to say. Not just Bipin Chandra, even many other people. For example, there's another historian. His name is Aditya Mukherjee, and he talks about that how Aditya Mukherjee. Now he talks about, just giving you reference. You don't have to mention these names. If you can, that's fine. You will sound very good in your paper if you can. But I've come on. It's very difficult to remember all this. Anyway, so Aditya Mukherjee, he says that the approach of the capitalist was multi-pronged. He uses this word multi-pronged against the imperialism and to mean right. Now, basically, the issue with the capitalist and one of the reasons for which they were hesitant over here, it was that the capitalists were afraid, actually, right? They were afraid. And what were they afraid of? They were afraid of the left wing radicalism, because when the labor gets radical, then the factories will stop. The factory will stop, and once factory stops, there would be huge losses and capitalists would lose. That was one of the major reasons. That's the second reason of the hesitation by the capitalists in fully supporting the nationalist movement of India. And thus, because of all these reasons, capitalists came to support. I'll just put it here. This is a very important thing I'm saying. There's a lot of confusion all around regarding this. Capitalists, because of above said reasons, came in full support of Congress. Now, just because capitalists supported Congress does not make Congress a party of capitalists at that time. It had support of almost all the people, even including the Muslims, the backward classes. Even though some Muslims supported Jinnah and some backward classes were with Ambedkar, doesn't mean that Congress did not have support of backward classes or Muslims or Sikhs or other religions and so on. But one thing is important. That is for sure, that Congress had certain impact of what is called as bourgeois ideological hegemony. BOURGEOIS, bourgeois ideological hegemony. Now this means that the Congress was impacted to some extent by capitalism. Actually, the reason of I'm writing this hi-fi sounding word over here is that this is the word officially used by many writers in their books. For example, this was first used by Tomlinson in his book. Tomlinson. I'm just giving you reference just for sake of surety, like, you know. Otherwise, you don't have to remember this even just to understand. Always write this in your own words. Now, not just this, capitalists also were in support of Gandhiji. Why? Because Gandhi, he was talking about non-violence. And who likes violence? Only probably the hooligans. But non-violence will mean that there was space for business. That is what is important. And thus they supported Gandhiji, and they obviously they started funding it to him. We will be talking about these people very soon in just few minutes, that they funded Congress and even Gandhi's movements. But it doesn't mean that they were impacted by it. Just because somebody, for example, there is, let's say, some X party. Now this party is funded by somebody. it does not mean essentially that they would be impacted. It depends on your level of earnestness or your sincerity, all those things. In fact, this author Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, he writes that though Gandhian idea, thus that he writes this, thus although Gandhian ideology was not based on capital interest, some of its concepts were attractive to them. Although Gandhi was like there should not be industrialization which takes away the jobs, the net amount of jobs, because that is Gandhian ideology. Capitalists would, might not like that kind of ideology, but some aspects were attracted, and thus capitalists supported Gandhi ji. In fact, I can give you the proof of it also. For example, this some businessmen. For example, there was G.D. Birla. And then there was the businessman like Jamnalal Bajaj. Jamnalal Bajaj. Just remember the surnames, that will be enough for your paper. Birla, Bajaj. These two people, or they became close associates of Gandhi, right? But at the same time, there's one person, if you remember, I've already talked about him and in quite a detail when I was talking in this lecture on Gandhi. And this man is Ambalal Sarabhai. Now, he was not fully in support of Gandhi. He was quite a capitalist. He did not like his style, right? And he was not happy with the, if you remember, Ahmedabad mill strike issue when we discussed that. Ahmedabad mill strike. You can please go back and refer to that lecture in the series. I would like try to hyperlink this. And that reminds me, I hope you are listening to all the lectures with annotations on. That is very important for you. Anyway, so Gandhi had support of capitalists. There can be question in your paper. Discuss the attitude of capitalists to Gandhi. That can be a question in your paper. So when Gandhi started non-cooperation movement, it was of course funded, and this was generously funded. And for this there was a fund made, if you remember, called Tilak Swaraj Fund. Now Tilak Swaraj Fund, we have already discussed this in detail. What was this fund for? I'm not doing that here. But it was at the time of non-cooperation movement, that much I can tell you. This was generously funded by the capitalists. But it's very interesting that at that time, something called anti-non-cooperation society, this was made. Now, this is very interesting part of it. And they were businessmen. For example, there was Purushottam Das, Thakur Das, Purushottam Das, Thakur Das, and there was people like R.D. Tata. These people, gave their blessings to this anti-non-cooperation society because they were not fully in support of this ideology of opposing the Britishers at that time. Nevertheless, not even for a moment you should consider these people as anti-national. No. Why? Because after 1922 there was a change. Let's discuss what was this change. Now, after 1922, what happened that all these capitalists started supporting nationalist movement? The reasons were many. One was the World War, of course, it had already deteriorated economy very badly. Though it ended in 1919, but in spite of that, it was still the effects of it were still looming large over the India's economy. Now, because of this, they said, okay, that means if they realized, there was a realization in the capitalist that if we have to succeed in business, we have to have our own government whose policies would not be imperialistic. This realization started dawning, started coming. Third thing that happened was the Japanese. The Japanese were producing very cheap goods. Now that gave competition, and so thus there was urgency of having our own government. Then Britishers were having this excise duty on one of the most important industries of India, that is cotton industry. And for this, they even joined the hands of the Swarajists. Who are Swarajists? Swarajists are the people in the Legislative Assembly. We have already talked in detail about them when I was talking of the decade of the 1920s. Now please go and try to recall this lecture, or you can always listen to this lecture again. I will again try to hyperlink, but this will take some time. Now, there were other issues, even more issues. For example, this was the currency policy of the Britishers, because they artificially fixed a high rupee sterling exchange rate. They artificially fixed it, which was detrimental to Indian economy. And by the time 1930s came, by the time 1930 came, almost all sections of Indian business community started supporting the nationalist movement. In fact, Congress was quite sensitive to their demands. So when these people started supporting the nationalist movement, how did our movement respond back to these people? That now we will be discussing. So the response of the nationalists to the capitalist, it was that, first of all, as I just said, Congress was now more sensitive to their demands. When Gandhi ji, he came with his 11-point ultimatum, 11-point agenda, if you remember this, it was given to Lord, come on, just say the name right, it is Lord Irwin, right? Now, in this Lord Irwin, he gave to him 11 demands, and out of these 11 demands, 3 demands in particular were related to the capitalists. And what were those 3 demands? I'll just give you a quick reminder. Number 1, that the rupee sterling exchange rate should not be controlled, or it should be brought down to particular level. So rupee sterling exchange rate, right? Number 1. Number 2 is protection for Indian cotton industry. So he knew the economy well, right? And number 3 was the reservation of coastal shipping for Indian companies. Reservation of coastal shipping for Indian companies, because normally Indian goods would keep lying and they would not move. So it was quite you can see this, that there was this demand. Okay, now all is going well, nationalists are very happy, but then again, you see, it's like the things are moving like this, right? Sometimes they're supporting, sometimes they are not. So what happened that as the civil disobedience movement started, CDM, the business responses were again mixed. Some people supported and some did not support it. You see, actually, the realization comes only after you suffered. And once it's like this, you suffer, then there is a realization, oh no, we should have supported nationalism. But then you have to suffer again. So what do? You leave them. But then there comes more suffering, and what do? You realize again, right? This is the circle that keeps going on, and this is what was happening with the capitalist. So I will just cut down the story here, because I can actually discuss to you the whole story from movement to movement, what were capitalists doing. That will go beyond the scope of general studies. But now, in the background of the argument that I gave you, a question was raised, and the question was that, were capitalists controlling the movement? Were capitalists controlling now the nationalist movement? Because they would give the money. Without money, nothing can happen. Controlling the nationalist movement? That is the question which was being asked now, which was being debated and has been point of debate among many historians as well. Because you see, the reason is simple. Why was this question being raised? Because capitalists were quite clear in their politics. They thought that we will just confine Congress to constitutional politics. We will not let them come openly against the Britisher, as that impacted the market. It's very simple. If Congress agitates, people are on road and they are striking, the market is closed, no goods are being sold. When nothing is being sold, capitalists suffering the loss. So they thought that we will confine the Congress to constitutional politics, and we will clip its socialist wings. So they were trying this, but this is an argument, this is a debate. Now we will be discussing this debate in the next lecture. And in the next lecture, first we will discuss this debate that I just mentioned to you. Number two, we will discuss about FICCI, how FICCI was formed, because that's very important, very interesting. You must be hearing its name even these days. So number three is Bombay Plan, that we will be discussing, and then there are a few miscellaneous things about this, and then this topic on the capitalists and the nationalists will end, right? That is how it will be going. Now before you go, you have to pay me fees for this lecture. Okay, I'm just kidding, right? It's your wish if you want to do that. At least you can do this much for me, and if you like this video, you can share it with others. This helps move the channel. And if you like the video, you should click on the like button, because then I get to know that you are liking the methodology of teaching, you're enjoying it. And finally, for yourself, if you want this video and all the future ones to come in your email box, then you need to subscribe to us, and that you can do by clicking over here, right? So that is all, and thank you so much.